I don't even know why my cousin had that board. It was shoved in the back of his closet underneath a pile of old jackets, like he didn't even remember that it was actually there. And I found it during a summer visit when my parents had dumped me off at my aunts and uncles for that weekend. Holy crap, is this a real Ouija board? I yanked it free, holding it up like I just discovered buried treasure. My cousin Zack, who barely was even interested. Yeah, I guess. I've had it for a while. Does it work? I don't know. We used it once or twice, but nothing really happened. I flipped open the box and ran my fingers along the board's smooth, lacquered surface, the yellowed letters and the planchette tucked neatly inside it. My skin prickled with a thrill that I couldn't explain. This was power, a portal to the other side. Can I have it? Zack snorted. Yeah, I guess if you want. I don't really mess with that stuff, so. My aunt overheard and immediately made a face. Please take it. I hate having that thing in my house. And that only made me want it more. When I got home, I gathered up my friends and showed them my new prize. We all huddled around it, wide-eyed, and whispered about ghosts, spirits, demons, things that we didn't fully understand but were desperate to know about. We decided then and there, we're gonna make contact. At first, it was just a game, you know? We'd take it to different places, abandoned houses, shadowed corners of the woods, an old train yard behind Sam's house, and ask those stupid questions. Is there anybody there? Can you show us a sign? And most of the time, nothing happened. But sometimes the planchette would twitch under our fingers. Sometimes a breath of cold air would snake between us and shiver up our spines. And sometimes the night would feel all wrong. And then there was Brian. Brian was not like the rest of us. He didn't just like the board, he was infatuated with it. He wanted it, needed it, like a starving man staring at a feast in front of him. After I got the thing, he made it his entire identity. It's all he talked about, all his thoughts seemed to be about, and all he wanted to do. So, honestly, I should have seen it then, and I should have never let him play it. It was harmless. Actually, at first it was hilarious. Brian would really lean into the whole experience and give us this total cringe fest. We'd gather up in the woods after school, huddled up in a circle as the sun would dip low, the Ouija board balanced on somebody's knees. We'd place our fingers on the planchette itself, barely touching it, and ask those same tired old questions that I know you've heard 100 times. Is there anybody here with us? What's your name? How'd you die? Most of it was probably us clearly moving it, feeding off one another's energy, but every now and again the board answered in ways that really didn't make sense, and it knew things that it shouldn't. It would spell out names that we didn't recognize, give us numbers, dates, and stories to go along with it. So we started keeping track of them, our quote-unquote spirits. There was Jacob, who claimed he drowned in the river 20 years ago. Missy, who only ever spelled out help me over and over. And then Richard, who swore he was murdered but wouldn't say by who. And then there was Brian. Not a spirit, the real Brian. I don't know how or when it started, but at some point Brian just stopped being part of the group. He became the group. He was the first one to show up and the last one to leave. He needed the board in a way that made us feel really uneasy. He started taking it home himself, which was never originally part of the deal. The board itself was mine, and it stayed at my house, but one day he just begged me. Please, 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 just for the weekend, he said. I swear I'll bring it back to you Monday. I didn't like it, but I agreed. Monday came, and the board didn't follow. Instead, Brian showed up at school looking like hell. His skin was pale and his eyes had rings around him that were dark circles, his fingers twitching like he hadn't slept in days. Dude, what the hell's wrong with you? I asked. He stared at me, dead serious, and said, It came to my house. What? One of them, I don't know who, but I woke up last night and my whole room was trashed. My desk was overturned, my posters were ripped down, my closet door was wide open, and I didn't do any of it, I swear to God. I thought he was messing with me. I even laughed. Yeah, okay there, Brian, yeah, sure. But his face didn't change. Come see it for yourself then. And so we did. A few of us rode our bikes over after school expecting that lame attempt at a prank, but the second I stepped inside of his room, my stomach immediately dropped. The place was indeed trashed. His mattress was half off the frame, his books were scattered across the floor. His mirror was shattered, not cracked, shattered, glass shards still littering his desk. The worst part, his closet door was now covered in these scratches. And it wasn't claw marks, not something an animal would make. There were words. They were jagged, uneven, but they were there, scrawled deeply into the wood. Missy, Jacob, Richard. The names of our ghosts that we had spoken with. We all stood there in silence, staring until Brian lifted up his shirt. And that's when we saw all the cuts. There were these thin, shallow scratches that ran across his stomach, his ribs, his chest. Angry red lines that looked like they'd been carved with a needle. And there, just below his ribs, was another word. Missy. She did this to me, he whispered. She came to me last night. She was standing at the foot of my bed just watching me. Nobody knew what to say or how to respond. Even the biggest skeptics in our group couldn't explain it all. And Brian wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, things got even worse for him. He became super paranoid and jumpy. His hands would always be twitching, his eyes darting around like he was waiting for someone or something to jump out at him. And he talked about the board constantly. I'm pretty sure they're following me. I hear voices at night. I wake up and things are different, moved, broken. None of us really wanted to deal with it though. We stopped inviting him to play with us. We stopped using the board altogether. We knew Brian was making all this up for attention because why else would it only happen to him? We bought it at first, but it all came together. His obsessive nature, the way he acted when we were around, this was all a ruse. But Brian couldn't let it go. One afternoon, he showed up at my house wild-eyed and breathless. Come with me right now. I didn't want to, but I did. I followed him and biked out of the woods where we usually played. Everybody else was already there, sitting in a circle, the board now in the middle. One last time, Brian said, I need to talk to them. We sat down hesitantly, placing our fingers on the planchette. Who is here with us? Brian asked aloud, and the planchette moved really quickly. Missy, came the response. Brian's breath hitched. What do you want? Y-O-U. The air immediately changed, and the woods suddenly felt far too quiet. Brian started shaking. It was subtle at first, his fingers trembling, but then it got worse. His whole body seemed to convulse, jerking violently, and his head snapped back. One of us gasped out loud, and another cursed under their breath. He stopped, went still, and slumped forward. When he looked up, something was different, wrong. His eyes, his expression, it wasn't Brian anymore, or at least that's what he wanted us to think, right? His mouth twisted up into this slow, eerie grin. She's here, he whispered, but it wasn't his voice. It was low and creepy as hell. And then he pulled out a knife. I don't know where the hell it came from. 1 second his hands were empty, and the next he's holding this rusty hunting knife. I couldn't believe it. This was like a real nightmare now. This was the last person in the last situation in the worst setting possible you would want to have a knife. We all felt that immediate danger and took a step back. That first slash barely missed Sam's face, and everybody screamed. I scrambled backward and kicked up dirt, pulse hammering as Brian lunged at all of us, the knife swinging wildly. I ran and we all ran. We left him there. We left the board, straight up went home and told our parents everything. It was over after that. The board, the names, Brian's obsession, how he lost his mind in the woods, and how he tried to attack us. But what more could we do? It wasn't worth bodily harm, and plus, fuck Brian. He was a nerd ass about it the whole time, so finally telling on him almost felt like justice in the moment. And at first, none of our parents really believed us. Then we told him about his house, about the scratches on the closet, the mirror, the cuts on his body. My dad stood there never really saying a word. He just grabbed the phone and rang Brian's house immediately. I could tell his mom answered on the first ring. "Hey, we need to talk," my dad said, and they made plans, and then Brian's parents came over maybe an hour later. They looked like hell too, like they hadn't slept in days either. I sat in the living room while our parents spoke in these hushed, serious voices, and Brian wasn't there. "Grounded," his mom said. "A month, no phone, no TV, no visitors, no nothing." Apparently he denied everything, said that we were lying and making up stories, trying to get him into trouble, but when his parents checked his room, they found that knife in question. There was blood on the blade, and they even found that Ouija board. It wasn't enough to suggest that he seriously hurt himself or us, but enough to scare them, enough to prove that something was indeed very, very wrong. I don't know what happened to Brian after that. We never ended up talking again. And even when his punishment ended, he avoided us at school, acted like we no longer existed to him. But the thing that scared me the most is he never asked for the board. His parents gave it to my parents. History after that, not once. As for the board itself, my parents didn't let me keep it. My dad packed it up in a garbage bag and then drove me back to my cousin's house, dropping it off without saying another word. My aunt didn't argue, she just nodded, took it and shoved it back into the closet. I never saw it again, and I never played again. I watched that board take somebody that I knew and change him into somebody that I didn't. And for years after, he was really strange as hell. I wasn't really friends with him once it was all said and done. I wonder if Brian ever got better. Can you actually recover from pretending to be crazy? I was 10 years old when I found that Ouija board. It was buried inside this cardboard box in the attic, hidden beneath stacks and stacks of old photo albums from my father during his high school years. I wasn't supposed to be up there. The attic was off limits, a place of splinters and forgotten things, but that summer it was really long and I was bored, so I was at that age where rules were starting to lose their meaning to me. I remember peeling back that dust-covered lid and finding it inside. Thick, aged wood with fading letters. The planchette still nestled in its place, almost like it was waiting to be discovered. It kind of reminded me of Jumanji. I traced my fingers over the carved letters. It smelled old and a little like mildew and a little like skunk. It didn't really scare me, not then. I was too young and full of vinegar to be afraid of something I didn't truly understand. I don't know why I thought about Aunt Candace at first, but maybe it was because she'd been gone 2 years now. Maybe it was because she used to tell me stories about ghosts and spirit herself when my mother wasn't listening. She always said that she believed in the other side, that death was not the end, that maybe if you listened closely, you could hear the ones who'd gone before you. I missed her. She was the only one who let me stay up late when she babysat, the one who taught me how to braid my hair, the one who never treated me like a little kid. When she died, something inside my mother seemed to go with her too. The whole family just got a little weird without Aunt Candy. I thought maybe the board could bring her back, even for just a moment, even if it was a brief exchange, and that was better than nothing, right? Just long enough to say goodbye. I took it downstairs carefully, like it was fragile, something sacred. I told myself I'd just wait for the perfect moment to open it up and try. I didn't know what I was inviting in, what I was asking for. The fact that I was doing this all alone is completely mind-boggling to me now. I didn't really expect something was going to answer me. It was a hot day, the kind where the air in the house really didn't move, humid, and had the scent of cut grass and sun-baked pavement creeping in through the window screens. My parents had already left for work hours ago. The house was mine until evening. I could do whatever I wanted until that sun went down. I waited until midday, when the sun was high and strong, when the shadows in the house were soft and harmless. It just made sense to do it then. Ghosts like the dark, didn't they? That's what Aunt Candace used to say. They don't like sunlight, my Aunt Candace used to say. I carried that board in my father's office. It was the darkest place in the house that I could think of, even at noon. The blinds were always drawn and the air was always a little stale. I set the board on his desk, pulled out a candle from my mother's stash in the kitchen, and struck a match and lit the wick, watching the flame flicker and stretch as I lowered myself onto the carpet. I placed my fingers lightly on the planchette. It felt cool and smooth, a game piece, nothing more. "Auntie?" I whispered. "Are you here?" Nothing. The candle wavered, but that was probably the air conditioning kicking on. "It's just me. I wanted to talk." Still, the board remained silent, and I kind of felt silly, childish. I was talking to a piece of wood after all. But then the planchette twitched beneath my fingertips. I froze, and my breath now felt alien, like it was a new sensation to me. Slowly, it slid to yes. I quickly swallowed my disbelief. My fingers were barely pressed against the planchette. I was sure about that. But maybe my hands moved without me noticing. Maybe my brain was filling in the blanks. Even in my little brain, I knew it was possible that I might be pulling my own leg. "Is this really you, though?" I whispered. "Yes," was the response. I felt dizzy. I'd imagined this moment so many times. I had 1,000 things that I wanted to say, and now that I had the chance, my tongue felt thick and my mind was empty. "I miss you," I said finally. "I miss you too." A lump now caught in my throat as I read that response. It was real. It's real, and it's happening now. I talked for a while, rambling on, telling Aunt Candace about school, about how Mom still cried sometimes, and Dad barely even mentioned her name. I told her about things that she'd miss, how different everything felt without her. The planchette would respond, moving in slow, measured strokes, answering questions and giving me comfort. But I have to admit that something felt wrong. At first it was small, these little details. I'd say something about my birthday party and the response wouldn't quite line up. I'd mention a book that she used to read me and she wouldn't seem to remember it. I asked her the last birthday present that she'd gotten me before passing, and she had no idea at all. I brushed it off. Maybe in death you forget these kind of things. Maybe memories were different on the other side, so I asked, "Aunt Candace, is this really you?" The planchette then hesitated and responded, "No." The temperature in the room almost seemed to drop in the moment. The candle's flames bent sharply, nearly guttering out. I felt this chill crawl up my spine, an ancient instinct whispering, "This is wrong. You need to stop." My hands trembled. I wanted to move them, to rip them away from the board, but something inside me, something awful, morbid curiosity, whatever you want to call it, kept them where they were. "Who are you?" I asked. The planchette then moved, fast and sharp. It felt almost impatient. "Aunt Tilly," is the response I got back, and that name meant nothing to me. Fingers were so light on the planchette now, I knew that I was not the one moving it. "I don't know you," I whispered. "Yes, you do." I shook my head, bile rising in my throat. I don't," I insisted. "I don't have an Aunt Tilly." "Yes, you do," the board repeated over and over. Then it paused, then responded again. "I died before we met." My stomach turned to ice, and I felt the weight of being home alone now, of being vulnerable and in danger. I didn't want to play anymore. "I have to go," I said quickly, and pushed back from the board. The planchette jerked violently beneath my fingertips, and my breath hitched. It felt like a hand was gripping my own, forcing it to stay where it was. I don't want to talk anymore," I said, voice shaking. The planchette skated over the board, spelling too fast now, letters sharp and frantic. "Stay." I pushed the board away and stumbled to my feet. The candle then snuffed itself out, and the room plunged into this heavy, suffocating darkness. For a moment, I just stood there frozen, pulse hammering in my ears. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch toward me now, curling up at my feet and clinging to my skin. Then, a noise that was soft, almost tender, came from the hallway. A baby's cry. I ran. I didn't clean up the board, I didn't blow out the candle, I just ran. Out of my father's office, down the hall, into the kitchen where the light was bright and warm, and the air still smelled like old coffee and my mother's vanilla candles. I sat there shaking until my mom came home. She barely even set her purse down before I blurted out the board and the name, Aunt Tilly. She froze mid-step like I just smacked her, and for a long moment she didn't say anything. Then slowly she pulled out a chair and sank into it. Her hands then clasped together so tightly I think her knuckles started to go white. "Where did you hear that name?" she asked. "The board," I whispered. I didn't know her, but she seemed to know me. My mother swallowed, her eyes distant and unfocused. She looked guilty. "Tilly was my sister," she said finally. "She died before I was born." A thick silence stretched between us. "But I never told anyone," she continued, almost talking to herself now. "Not even your father. How did you—" She trailed off, shook her head, and then stood up abruptly. "Put that board away," she said, "and don't ever touch it again." So that's what I did. I shoved it back into the attic, under the boxes, and under dust and time. That night I heard footsteps up and down the hall, far too light to be my parents. They were soft and hesitant, like the way a child walks when they're looking for something. They stopped at my bedroom door. Then, slowly and carefully, they pressed against the wood, and I held my breath the whole time. I never played with that board again, and my mom confided in me later with a bit more of the truth. The Ouija board was something she originally bought at the time of her mother's death. My mom and Aunt Candace wanted to make contact with their mom and find some kind of closure. She claimed it worked a little, but it was very unsettling, so they decided not to mess with it anymore. So there it sat in the attic for years before I discovered it. Thinking back now, I wonder where that board is and who's waiting to say hello on the other side. This is a true story I'll be translating for my mom since she doesn't speak or write English well. But first, in order for the story to make any sense to you, I'll have to shine some light on my childhood and my upbringing. Growing up in Fairfield, California with my sister, mom, and my dad, we definitely weren't the family that you would find at church. You would never see me or my family at all at church unless somebody had died. I'm agnostic now, but I grew up not knowing anything about what the Bible had to say, so when my mom told me this story, and when I found some information through my own research with the Satanic Bible, that's when everything clicked and proved to be true. Here is her story. It was Christmas, December 1989. I had just turned 20 that year. Me and a few of my family members wanted to go over to a friend's house where there would be a Christmas party. After dinner and opening up our Secret Santa gifts, we left for that party. Once there, everything went as usual until we were heading out and getting ready to go back home. Before we headed out the door, my cousin Estella realized that she had lost her expensive watch, the new one that had just been given to her by my niece Martha earlier that night for Secret Santa. She was devastated about losing it already, the same day that she'd already gotten it. That's when Maria's sister Martha claimed that she knew a way to find it. She said that she had a Ouija board out in the vehicle. She told Estella, "Don't worry," and then advised everybody to use the board so that we could find the watch. We went out, grabbed the board, and then went to our friend's house, locking ourselves in a room. It was me, Estella, Maria, Martha, my brother Arthur, and my sister Lupe, and our one other friend who lived in that house. Martha and Maria are my nieces, but both are around the same age as me. We set up some candles, and while the 7 of us sat around the board, one of us also had a notepad and pen. The first question we asked, "Where's the watch that Estella lost?" The board immediately started to spell out something, the make, the model, and the color of a vehicle. So obviously we go back outside and to our complete surprise, we found that watch on the ground behind the tire of the exact model and color vehicle. This was my introduction to a Ouija board. Nothing evil or negative happened, so I went back inside to the board, and we started asking all those cliche questions that people would always ask. So a few weeks go by, and that's when Martha's mom found out that she indeed had a Ouija board of her own. Her mom immediately made her get rid of it because she believed that the board itself was evil and would bring negative energy into their home and their lives. But instead of throwing it away, I asked if I could keep it. Martha accepted, and that's when I took it home with me. While staying at my mother's house, my sister Lupe and I would secretly stay up late at night, playing with it. When I ended up pregnant later on with my first child, I moved on and got myself my own apartment. And that's when, almost every single day after work, I would stay up, playing it all alone. At that time, I had a niece named Isabel who lived in Sacramento and decided to move in with me. She joined me almost daily in my use of that Ouija board. And honestly, there wasn't a single day that we didn't play it. Every day after work, we would eat, shower, then play on that board for many, many hours. That first couple of weeks playing back to back every day, the spirit involved seemed to claim that it was my father, the one who died when I was 11, and I believed it. I've always missed him since, and he'd been gone for a long time now. The board even verified this with proof that it was indeed my father, and only things that I knew from when I was a child. It spelled out, "Don't kill the bees," because when I was a kid I used to kill the bees in my dad's honey farm, and nobody knew I did that other than me and my father. He also told my niece that he loved her singing, which turned out to be true. This would continue on, and by the first month of playing every day, that planchette started moving on its own, and then weird stuff would follow. Perfume bottles and other belongings that were left on top of drawers would move to the center of the bed. Almost every single time we stepped outside, crows would fly down in these large groups toward us and try to attack us. We would hear voices of people moaning and groaning as if they were in pain. We would see fireballs float down from the hall, getting smaller and smaller. That's when everything really took a turn. The board then claimed that it could indeed give us the winning numbers to the lottery. It could make us rich, but in return, we'd have to kill someone. At that point, I knew it was no longer my father speaking, and we were honestly starting to get really freaked out. Obviously, we refused to kill somebody for winning numbers, but the board would not drop it. It kept trying to get us to accept the deal. We confronted the board and asked it to tell us who it really is, but it seemed like it didn't want to answer us, never really telling us exactly who it was. Each time we would ask, it would come up with some kind of varied answer. We didn't let up though and asked again and again who we're speaking to. It ended up giving us an answer, but it was a person who drowned many, many years ago inside Lake Berryessa. Now, we didn't trust the board anymore, and obviously with everything that had been happening, we didn't believe anything it told us. So we kept pressing. Who are you? Who is this? Then it said, if you welcome me into your life, into your home, I'll show you. Refusing to do that as well, that's when it dropped the bomb. It said its name was Mammon. Not being real familiar with any kind of gospel or anything about the Bible in general, I decided to call my sister Maria, who was barely getting into the Christian church. I told her everything, but she didn't believe me. She honestly thought I was playing a trick on her or some kind of game, that it wasn't real. I tried and tried to convince her that this is really happening, this is actually really going on. If it's real, she said, ask the board where our brother Raymond is. It was really only something that she and my mom knew. So I did. The board almost immediately responded. Contra Costa County Jail. Now with that proof, my sister Maria called her mother-in-law, who was extremely into the church, and asked who that name was. 5 minutes later, I get a call back, telling me to stop playing on that Ouija board right now, get rid of it. After that, we never played again. I've heard stories about family and friends, their homes burning down due to playing on the Ouija board, cases of people throwing it away only to have it show back up inside their home not long after. So I wrapped it up in a plastic bag, kept kept it tucked away in my closet. But we still witnessed the moaning, the floating fireballs, the belongings being moved around, and the birds attacking us. 6 months go by, and while I was moving out of my apartment, my sister's brother-in-law was helping me move. He noticed the Ouija board and asked if he could keep it. I didn't tell him all the negative stuff that came with playing that game, and I just told him, "Yeah, go ahead. You can have it." "1999 was really this weird year. Y2K paranoia, Napster downloads that took all night long, a mall culture that hadn't quite realized it was about to die. I was in my junior year of high school. I loved a good soft pretzel and an orange Julius. I lived for being at the mall, wandering through Hot Topic and Spencer's just to laugh at the edgy t-shirts and those weird sex toys. And that's where I stumbled upon my first Ouija board. It was wedged between the racks of a novelty beer bong and blacklight posters, just sitting there almost like it was waiting specifically for me. The box was that cheap cardboard, wrapped up in plastic. It wasn't some antique relic or an old school wooden board. It was mass-produced, the kind that Hasbro probably sold to suburban moms right alongside Monopoly. But I guess that was the charm of it. It was a gag, a party prop, a way to freak people out when the beer ran low and the conversation would get stale, so... Still, it was really odd to see it like that, so sterile, almost like it was a kid's toy. I definitely wasn't the kind of guy who believed in ghosts or demons. Sure, I'd watch my fair share of horror movies, but I was always the one pointing out the bad special effects, rolling my eyes at the obvious jump scares, and most of my friends were the same way. We liked to play with that creepy shit, but didn't really believe in it. We'd gone to abandoned houses on Route 9, told stories about the kid who supposedly burned to death inside his attic, and dared each other to sleep there. Nobody would last more than an hour, but that wasn't because of the ghost, just because it was cold as hell and smelled like mold up there. So this Ouija board was kind of perfect. I bought it with $20 that I had crumpled up in my back pocket, the cashier barely even glancing at me as he bagged it up. It's just another dumb mall purchase, something to throw in the closet with old issues of Fangoria and half-burnt candles from a seance that we tried once in my basement. The first time that we tried to use it, nothing happened. A couple of us sat in my friend Ryan's room. The lights were dim, and 9 Inch Nails was humming low in the background. We placed our fingers on the planchette and asked those typical questions that you do. Is anybody there? What's your name? How'd you die? And we waited. The thing moved, sure, but obviously it was one of us moving it. I called them out, they would laugh, and then we'd move on to something else. But other times, it was weird. One night at a different party, the board spelled out, "No nightcap." We laughed it off, but the girl sitting across from me, Laura, looked kind of pale. "That's what my grandma said to my mom before she died," she whispered. And that weirded us all out for sure. We played it up for drama, but the unease in her voice really struck a chord with me. Another time, it gave us a series of numbers that none of us really recognized. Timmy, my best friend, wrote them all down and looked them up later. It ended up being an address to a house just 2 streets over. Most of the time, again, it was just a fun way to mess with people, a way to break the ice, get the girls to huddle closer to you, and get the guys to act like tough skeptics. It was all bullshit, it was fun. At least, that's what I thought. But at Timmy's party, everything changed. We threw ragers that could only happen in '99, a perfect mix of high school kids and college kids, packed up into a house with 0 adult supervision, fueled of course by cheap beer and whatever liquor somebody could manage to get their hands on. The music was loud, the lights were dim, and the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the faint burn of somebody's shitty weed. It was one of those nights that just felt endless, where every room had its own little chaos happening in itself. So once it started to die down, I brought out the Ouija board, of course. It was almost a tradition at this point. A reliable way to get some laughs, and maybe if you're lucky, a few nervous gasps. I didn't pull it out right away. No, you gotta wait for the right moment. When the initial drinking rush was over and when people had stopped crowding the stereo, arguing over which Limp Bizkit song to blast next, when the energy would dip just enough that people were now open to the suggestion. That moment came around midnight, and a few of us were in the living room, slumped on couches or leaning up against the walls, caught in that strange in-between space where people were either winding down or looking for their next thrill, and that's when I said it. "You guys want to try out the Ouija board?" A couple of people immediately perked up, college kids mostly, drunk enough to be open to anything, but not so far gone that they couldn't focus. Timmy was already slurring his words and clapped me on the back. "Hell yeah, man. Let's freak some people out." Within minutes, we'd set the scene. The big wooden dining room table quickly became our seance space. Somebody turned off most of the lights, leaving only a few flickering candles. Somebody else put on the TV but turned it to static. The low hiss of white noise now buzzed through the room, almost like some kind of angry whisper. It was perfect. We gathered round, maybe 7 or 8 of us, the rest just watching from the edges or too drunk to even care. The planchette sat in the middle of the board, waiting. I put my fingers on it first, along with Timmy and a couple of the other college guys. A girl named Angela, who looked skeptical but excited, joined in last. "All right," I said, grinning. "Let's see if we can piss off some ghosts." We started simple, like you do, those typical usual questions. "Anybody there?" Planchette hesitated, then drifted towards yes. Somebody giggled, but I could feel the tension creeping in now. "What's your name?" Angela asked. The planchette moved, spelling out something jerky and uneven. D-A-N-T-E. Timmy snorted. "Like the poet?" A guy across the table, one of the college girls, muttered, "That's not funny." "What?" I asked. He glanced around, eyes darting. There's an urban legend, man. The building, this house, it used to be an old social office in the 60s. Some dude named Dante offed himself here back in the day." A chill then quickly ran through the group. I even felt my skin prickle. Was that really true, or was he just fucking with us? Angela swallowed. "Dante? How did you die?" The planchette then started jerking, moving faster now than before. R-O-P-E. Okay, I said, forcing a laugh. "That's a little on the nose, don't you think?" But nobody else was laughing. One of the other guys, this heavy-set dude in a flannel, suddenly pushed back from the table. "We should stop." "Why?" Timmy frowned. "This is the best one yet, dude." "Because," the guy said, getting irritated. "You're messing with shit you don't understand, man." "Dude," I sighed. "It's a fucking game, man. I bought it literally from Spencer's." "That doesn't mean it's safe," he snapped back. "You ever hear about intents, of how this stuff really works? It's not the board, it's the people using it. If you open up a door to something that you can't shut..." The candles then flickered. The planchette jerked violently beneath our fingers, and Angela yelped out and pulled her hands away. The board then spelled something else. L-E-A-V-E. "Okay," I said now, more amused than even scared. "That's so cute." But the guy in the flannel was not having it. He was breathing faster now. His hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were turning white. "We have to stop." The guy was turning red at this point, but I couldn't tell if it was from the booze or just the situation. And then, before anybody could react, he shoved the table hard enough to knock the board off and to the ground. "What the fuck, man?" Timmy shot up. It started to occur to me just how drunk we all were in the moment. But the guy was already moving. His eyes were wild now. He stormed off into the kitchen, and for a second I thought he was just gonna go get a drink. Maybe splash some water on his face or something. And then I heard the door slam. He came back with a knife, and everybody immediately went into hysterics, thinking this guy was about to kill everybody. It was a real one, a big kitchen knife, sharp and gleaming in the candlelight. "Whoa, hey man," somebody stammered out. He pointed the blade at the table. His hands were shaking, but his grip was firm. "You don't know what you're fucking doing, man," he hissed. "You don't understand. This shit comes with a price. Now everybody get away from the table." "Dude, put the knife down," Angela said. He ignored her though. His breath was teetering on full panic now. "This demon shit's not a joke. This is very real. You think you're fucking playing the game? You don't mess with this stuff. Now get out of my way." The room was dead silent now. The static from the TV was the only noise and nobody was moving. Then suddenly, in one swift motion, he lunged for the Ouija board, like it had personally insulted him. The knife came down hard and stabbed straight through the middle of it. The board cracked and the planchette skidded off onto the floor. The knife was lodged in the wood of the table beneath it. Timmy reacted as this was his parents' dining set, and then somebody screamed. That was enough to snap people out of their own trance. A few of the guys rushed him, grabbed his arms, and wrestled the knife away. He fought back wild and thrashing, but he was far too drunk and uncoordinated. Timmy and I managed to push him toward the door, his feet dragging against the carpet as he cursed and spat at us. "You don't understand!" he screamed. "You let something in!" We shoved him outside and slammed the door behind him, and for a long time, nobody said anything. The candles flickered and the static buzzed. The Ouija board, still skewered on the table, sat in the middle of it all, and the word leave still buried in the backs of our mind. Then, from somewhere off deep in the house, something creaked. A long, low, slow groan of old wood shifting under weight. The front door was locked, but it sounded like somebody was walking upstairs. And for a second, nobody moved and nobody said anything. The air in the house had now obviously changed. It was thicker, heavier, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks open in the sky. The only sound was for that soft hum from the TV, blending in with the fading echoes of whatever was creaking upstairs. Angela coughed, breaking the silence and the tension. Then Timmy barked out a nervous laugh. "Jesus Christ, what a psycho." That seemed to snap everybody back. Angela pushed away from the table, shaking her head. What the hell was that? Who even is that guy? One of the college guys, the one who told that Dante story, exhaled through his nose and rubbed his temple. His name's Derek. I knew him from my dorm. He is kind of a weird dude. He drinks a lot and gets intense about religious shit. I didn't think he'd do this though. Then he gestured to the knife still stuck in the board. Go that far. Timmy let out a groan and rubbed his face. "Well, I guess that's the end of the night, folks." But something was gnawing at me. I looked at the board and that planchette knocked aside, the blade still buried in the cheap plastic. Derek had lost his mind, sure, but what were the odds the board would spell out leave just before he would flip out? What were the odds it would match up with a damn urban legend? I shaked off that thought. Most of the crowd had scattered after that. Some people left entirely, mumbling excuses, while others retreated back to the living room, turning up the music again and trying to shove that weirdness aside. A few diehards stuck around, but the mood had clearly shifted. Angela refused to touch the board. "You're throwing that thing out," she muttered before heading out with her friends, and I figured she was right. But as I pried that knife free and lifted up the board, I noticed something really weird. The blade had gone clean through the plastic and the table underneath, not even a scratch. Honestly, that should have been impossible. The knife was big and sharp. It should have left at least some kind of dent in the wood, but the surface was untouched and pristine, like the blade had only wanted to destroy the board. I shoved it into the trash can and then decided not really to think too hard about it. Eventually, people left or passed out in the living room, and Timmy crashed on the couch, snoring almost immediately. I found an empty recliner, slumped into it, and the exhaustion took over. The house was now quiet, but throughout the night, I could still hear random creaks and footfalls from upstairs, and at one point, I could have swore I heard a window open up and close. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, I woke up to this soft creaking noise. I opened up my eyes and my head was pounding from that cheap beer and no sleep. The room was dark now. The TV was finally turned off, but the house just felt wrong. That's when I saw the kitchen trash can. The Ouija board was sitting on the floor next to it. Not in the trash where I left it, but beside it. My skin went cold. I told myself, okay, maybe somebody knocked it out or made room for more beer cans and somebody thought it had been thrown away by mistake or something, you know? But as I stared at it, my stomach knotted. It was still split down the middle where Derek's knife had gone through, but the letters were faded, like the thing had suddenly weathered 10 years in a single hour. It looked like it was from the 1950s now or something. Not scratched, nothing like that, just faded. It made me feel really weird, crazy almost, and I didn't want to be around it anymore. I didn't wake up Timmy and I didn't tell anybody. I just picked it up, walked outside, and threw that thing in the dumpster across the street. Then I went home and tried to forget about it. We didn't do the satanic panic parties much really after that. In fact, nobody mentioned the board again. And I think we're all glad to be out from under such a weird drinking game.